Ladies and gentlemen, there's a quiet moment in every relationship. A moment when one person is already halfway out the door, while the other still believes they're holding on tight. It's in these silent spaces where hearts break, not from loud arguments, but from the slow erosion of trust and connection. She was planning her exit while holding my hand. Think about that. On the surface, everything looked fine. Smiles were shared, promises were exchanged, hands were held. But underneath, she was already gone. Why does this happen? It's not because people are inherently cruel or deceptive. It's because somewhere along the journey we stopped listening. We stopped seeing the signs. We stopped being present. Relationships don't typically end with a grand explosion, with shouting matches and dramatic exits. No, most of the time they dissolve quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a tide receding so gradually that you don't notice the water slipping away. The loud goodbye, the slammed door, the final argument, those are just the echoes of something that ended long ago. The real ending is silent. It happens in the unnoticed moments, the missed glances, the words left unsaid, the hand you stop reaching for. Think about it. When two people come together, it's not usually because of the big gestures or declarations. It's the little things, a shared look, a kind word, a gentle touch. Love is built in those moments, but it's also lost there. The absence of connection doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It's subtle. It's the dinner where no one speaks, the phone call that goes unanswered, the text left on read. It's the slow replacement of curiosity with complacency. The questions stop, the wonder fades, the silent drift begins, and yet we often miss these signs because they don't scream for attention. We're busy with work, distracted by our devices, preoccupied with our own thoughts. We tell ourselves that everything's fine. We assume that love is a constant, that it doesn't need tending. We believe that as long as there's no argument, no obvious betrayal, then all must be well. But the truth is, silence in a relationship is often more dangerous than shouting. It's a sign that something vital is missing: connection, presence, attention. It's easy to overlook this because silence doesn't feel urgent. A fight feels urgent. A crisis feels urgent, but silence is insidious. It creeps in quietly and convinces us that nothing is wrong, when in fact it's the very thing tearing the relationship apart. The silence grows like a chasm between two people, each on their own island, believing the other is still close by when in reality, the distance has grown vast. And by the time we realize it, the person we love is already emotionally gone, planning their exit while still holding our hand. This is why it's so important to pay attention to the quiet moments, to notice when the spark starts to dim, to ask the hard questions even when everything seems fine. How are we really doing? Is there something we're not talking about? How do you feel heard, seen, valued? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're necessary. They keep us connected. They break the silence. We also have to recognize our own role in creating silence. Are we withdrawing because we're afraid of conflict? Are we choosing silence over vulnerability? Are we assuming our partner should know what we need without us ever saying it out loud? If we're not willing to break the silence ourselves, we can't expect the other person to do it for us. The truth is, silence can be deceptive. It can lull us into thinking everything is fine when in reality, we're drifting further and further apart. The absence of conflict doesn't mean the presence of connection. In fact, some of the most disconnected relationships are the quietest ones. So don't wait for the shouting to start. Pay attention to the silence. Lean into the discomfort. Ask the hard questions. Listen not just to the words, but to the spaces between them. Hold your partner's hand, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Because once the silence has taken hold, once the distance has grown too wide, it may be too late to reach across. Relationships don't end with a bang. They end with a whisper. Don't wait until the silence becomes deafening. Speak up. Listen closely. Reconnect before it's too late. Presence is everything. It's easy to assume that being physically near someone equates to being present with them. But presence is not just proximity. It's attention. Proximity. It's attention. It's intention. It's being fully engaged with the person in front of you, offering your undivided focus and making them feel like in that moment, they are the most important person in your world. In our modern lives, with endless distractions at our fingertips, true presence has become rare. We can sit across the table from someone we love, scrolling through our phones, nodding along to a conversation we aren't really listening. We can be in the same room, yet worlds apart. When we do this, we send a message, whether we intend to or not, that the person in front of us is not our priority. And over time, this message erodes trust, connection, and love. Presence is about more than just listening to words. It's about listening to feelings, to body language, to the subtle cues that tell you something deeper is going on. It's noticing when your partner is quieter than usual, or when their laugh sounds forced. It's asking, "Are you really okay?" And waiting for the real answer, not the automatic, "I'm fine." When you're present, you create a space where someone feels safe to be themselves, to be honest, to be vulnerable. Think about how good it feels when someone gives you their full attention. When they put down their phone, look into your eyes and genuinely listen. It's rare, isn't it? And yet it's such a simple thing. True presence doesn't require grand gestures or elaborate plans. It's in the everyday moments over morning coffee, during a walk, or at the end of a long day. When you choose to show up fully, to be there without distractions, without multitasking. Presence is the foundation of love because it communicates. You matter to me. I see you. I hear you. You are important. Without this, relationships become transactional. We talk, but we don't really communicate. Share space, but we don't really connect. Over time, this creates distance, emotional distance. And that distance, if left unaddressed, becomes the silent destroyer of relationships. The good news is, presence is a choice. It's something we can cultivate. It's a skill we can practice. We can train ourselves to put down the phone, to look up from our screens, to make eye contact, to listen without interrupting, to ask deeper questions. It requires patience. It requires humility. It requires a willingness to be uncomfortable, to sit in silence, to listen to things we might not want to hear. But it's worth it. When you are present with someone, you're not just strengthening your relationship, you're also honoring them as a human being. You're telling them, "You are worthy of my time and attention." And in doing so, you're creating a space where love can grow. Presence also requires being present with yourself. You can't truly be there for someone else if you're not grounded in your own emotions, your own needs, your own truth. It's about self-awareness, about knowing when you're distracted or checked out, and gently bringing yourself back to the moment. It's about practicing mindfulness, paying attention to your thoughts, your breath, your surroundings. In the end, presence is everything because it's the bridge between two people. It's what transforms a relationship from a series of interactions into a living, breathing connection. It's not always easy. It requires effort. But it's in these moments of true presence that love is nourished, trust is built, and deep connection is formed. Without presence, love withers. With presence, love flourishes. And that's why presence is everything. We often think we lose people when they walk away, when the relationship officially ends, when the goodbye is spoken. But the truth is, we start losing them long before that moment. We lose them when they stop feeling seen, when they feel invisible, when they feel like their presence no longer matters. That's when the real loss begins. In any relationship, whether it's romantic, familial, or even a friendship, being seen is fundamental. It's the quiet acknowledgement that says, "I notice you, I value you, you matter." It's not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's the everyday moments of connection that build a sense of belonging and security. But when those moments start to disappear, when we stop noticing, when we stop listening, something in the other person begins to wither. Their spirit, their confidence, their trust, they all begin to fade. It's easy to get caught up in our own lives, our routines, our stresses. We assume that the people we love will always be there, always understand, always wait for us to turn back around. But people are not made to be invisible. They are made to feel important, cherished, heard. And when they don't, they start to shrink away. They begin to withhold, to pull back, to protect themselves from the hurt of being unseen. They start to emotionally disconnect. By the time they leave, physically, emotionally, or both, the real separation has already happened. It happened in the countless moments when their words were met with indifference, when their excitement was met with distraction, when their sadness was ignored, when their presence was taken for granted. These small moments may seem insignificant in isolation, but they accumulate, creating a chasm between two people. And over time, that chasm becomes too wide to bridge. We tell ourselves that love is about the big moments, the anniversaries, the birthdays, the milestones. But the truth is, love is in the details. It's in remembering their favorite song. It's in noticing when they're tired or when they're unusually quiet. It's in asking, "How are you feeling?" And waiting for the answer. It's in putting down your phone when they're speaking, in offering a hand to hold when they're overwhelmed, in making space for their emotions, even when it's inconvenient for you. When people feel seen, they feel safe. They feel valued. They feel like they belong. They feel like they belong. And that feeling is what keeps them close. It's what builds trust, intimacy, and resilience. But when that feeling is absent, even the strongest relationships can unravel, because no one wants to stay where they feel invisible. No one wants to keep giving their heart to someone who doesn't notice it. The most heartbreaking part is that many people don't leave because they want to. They leave because they feel they have no other choice. They've tried to be seen. They've tried to reconnect. They've tried to make themselves visible again. But when those efforts are met with indifference or dismissal, they begin to realize that staying would mean continuing to feel small, unheard, unimportant. So they leave not because they've stopped loving, but because they've stopped being seen. If we want to keep the people we love close, we must learn to see them, not just look at them, but truly see them. To notice the subtle shifts in their mood, to celebrate their wins, no matter how small, to listen without interrupting, to validate their feelings, even if we don't fully understand them, to show up fully and consistently and remind them that they matter. We don't lose people when they walk away. We lose them in the quiet moments when they stop feeling seen, when their presence fades into the background. When they realize they're alone, even when they're standing right beside us. It's not the leaving that breaks a relationship. It's the invisibility that pushes them to go. And if we can learn to truly see the people we love, we might just be able to hold on to them, not because we're grasping at them, but because we're making them feel so deeply valued that they never want to leave. Assumptions kill relationships, not because they're always wrong, but because they're silent. They live in the spaces between what we know and what we guess. They slip into our thoughts, quiet and unspoken, and they build walls where there should be doors. When we assume, we stop asking. We stop listening. We stop being curious about the person we're with. And when curiosity dies, so does connection. We assume they're fine because they haven't said otherwise. We assume they know how we feel about them, so we stop saying it. We assume they'll always be there because they've always been there. Because they smile, they're happy. Because they smile, they're happy. Because they don't complain, because they stay silent, they agree. But assumptions are dangerous. They fill in the gaps of what we don't know with stories we create in our own minds. And those stories are almost always incomplete, often wrong, and nearly always damaging. Assuming can come from laziness, yes, but more often it comes from fear. Fear of what we might hear if we ask. Fear of confrontation. Fear of the unknown. It's easier to assume than to ask hard questions. It's easier to believe our partner is happy than to deep and find out that they might not be. It's easier to stay in our comfort zone of assumptions than to risk the discomfort of truth. But relationships aren't built on comfort. They're built on truth, on openness, on a willingness to look at what's real, even when it's hard. When we assume, we start acting on those assumptions. We treat people based on what we think we know, not what they've actually told us. And that can create a dangerous disconnect. For example, if we assume our partner doesn't mind when we cancel plans, we stop valuing their time. If we assume they're not upset about something because they haven't mentioned it, we might ignore their pain. If we assume they know we love them, we stop showing it. And little by little, they begin to feel invisible, unimportant, neglected. Assumptions also silence the other person. When we assume, we don't leave room for them to express themselves. We don't ask for clarification or invite them to share. We might say things like, "I just thought you'd be okay with it," or "I figured you knew how I felt." These words create distance. They tell the other person that we'd rather fill in the blanks than actually hear them. And over time, they stop trying to be heard. They stop correcting our assumptions. They stop communicating altogether. And that's when the relationship starts to crumble. The cure for assumptions is simple but not easy. Communication. It's choosing to ask rather than guess. It's saying, "How do you feel about this?" or "What's really going on with you?" Or thus, showing you enough love, checking in even when things seem fine. It's choosing to be curious rather than comfortable. It's remembering that people change, and just because something was true yesterday doesn't mean it's true today. When we stop assuming, we open the door to deeper connection. We give our partner the space to be honest, to be vulnerable, to feel seen. We show them that we care enough to ask, to listen, to know them as they are right now, not as we assume them to be. And in doing so, we build a relationship based on truth, trust, and understanding. Assumptions kill relationships because they make us stop showing up. They convince us we know everything we need to know, when in reality, people are complex and ever-changing. If we want to keep love alive, we must kill the assumptions. We must choose curiosity. We must choose to ask, to listen, and to learn every single day. Because no matter how long we've been with someone, there's always more to know. If only we're willing to stop assuming and start asking. Ask the hard question. The ones that make your voice shake, the ones that leave you vulnerable, the ones that risk hearing answers you're not prepared for. Because without these questions, you're not really communicating. You're just skimming the surface, pretending everything's fine, filling the silence with comfortable words that mean nothing. But relationships can't survive on comfort alone. They need truth, they need depth, they need honesty, even when it's hard. The hard questions are the ones we avoid because they threaten the delicate balance we've built. Are you happy? Are you happy? Do you feel loved? Are we growing together or just going through the motions? These are questions that cut through the surface and go straight to the heart of things. They make us confront the possibility that things aren't as perfect as we want to believe. They force us to listen, really listen, without defensiveness, without trying to fix or explain or justify. And that's terrifying, but it's also necessary. Because when we avoid these questions, we leave the door open for assumptions, for silence, for disconnection. We convince ourselves that no news is good news, that if our partner hasn't brought something up, everything must be okay. But silence doesn't mean satisfaction. It doesn't mean everything is fine. It often means the opposite. It means something is being suppressed, ignored, pushed aside because it feels too uncomfortable to bring up. By asking the hard questions, we show that we care enough to know the truth, even if it hurts. We show that we're willing to sit with discomfort, to be vulnerable, to hear things that might challenge our ego or our expectation. We show that we're invested in the relationship, not just as a comfortable arrangement, but as a living, breathing connection that needs tending, nurturing, and sometimes uncomfortable truths to stay alive. These questions aren't just for when things are obviously wrong. They're for the quiet, ordinary days too. What do you need more of from me? How can I make you feel more valued? Is there anything we're not talking about that we should be? They're the questions that prevent problems from festering, that catch disconnection early, that keep the relationship dynamic and evolving. The hardest part is being ready to really hear the answers, to not get defensive, to not dismiss or minimize the other person's feelings. To recognize that their truth is valid, even if it's not what you wanted to hear. It's about creating a space where both people can be honest, where vulnerability is met with empathy, not judgment. Asking the hard questions is also about asking yourself, am I showing up fully in this relationship? Am I making them feel seen and heard? Am I truly listening, or am I just waiting for my turn to speak? It's about being brutally honest with yourself, recognizing your own shortcomings, and being willing to do the work to grow. When we ask these questions, we invite truth into the relationship. Into the relationship. And truth is the foundation of trust. Without it, the relationship becomes fragile, built on assumptions and unspoken frustrations. With it, the relationship becomes resilient, able to withstand challenges because both people are committed to facing reality together. So ask the hard question. Even when you're scared, even when you think you know the answers, even when you're afraid the answers might hurt. Because it's better to hear a hard truth now than to live in comfortable silence that eventually shatters. The hard questions are a gift, not just to your partner, but to yourself. They open the door to deeper connection, to growth, to understanding. And ultimately, they're what keep love alive. If you think everything is okay, look closer. It's easy to believe that silence means peace, that routine means stability, and that absence of conflict means contentment. But more often than not, the absence of overt problems doesn't mean that everything is truly okay. It might mean that something deeper has been overlooked. It might mean that the quiet has been masking a disconnection that's growing silently underneath the surface. Relationships rarely fall apart suddenly. More often, they erode gradually, in the little moments of neglect, in the unspoken words, in the assumptions we make, in the questions we never ask to. When we think everything is fine, it's tempting to stop paying attention. We slip into autopilot, assuming that just because nothing seems wrong, everything must be right. But that's exactly when we need to look closer. Looking closer means noticing the details. It's paying attention to the subtle changes in body language, the quiet withdrawal, the forced smile. It's listening not just to what's being said, but to what's being left unsaid. It's recognizing that a partner's silence during a conversation, or their reluctance to share their thoughts, might not mean they're content. It might mean they're resigned, feeling unseen or unheard. These signs are easy to dismiss, but they're the early warning signals that something isn't quite right. If you think everything is okay, consider when the last real conversation happened. Not just a chat about logistics or plans, but a deep, honest talk about feelings, needs, and concerns. If you can't remember, that's a sign to look closer, because real connection requires continual maintenance. It requires curiosity, presence, and a willingness to dig beneath the surface. When we stop asking, stop listening, stop being present, the relationship begins to drift. And that drift can go unnoticed until it becomes too wide to ignore. Looking closer also means reflecting on your own behavior. Are you truly showing up for your partner? Are you offering the attention, understanding, and presence they need? Or have you been assuming that everything's fine because they haven't complained? It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that no news is good news. But silence often signals a breakdown in communication, not its success. Sometimes people stop expressing their dissatisfaction because they believe it won't make a difference. They've tried to communicate but felt unheard. They've voiced their needs but saw no change. And eventually, they stop trying. Retreat into themselves, creating a silent distance that grows with each passing day. If you think everything is okay, is the slightest hint of withdrawal or disconnection, don't ignore it. Look closer. Looking closer also means confronting your own fears. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge that a relationship might be struggling. It's easier to stay in denial, to convince yourself that things are fine because admitting otherwise would be painful. But discomfort is where growth happens. It's where you find the opportunity to repair, to reconnect, to rebuild trust. If you think everything is okay, ask the questions you've been avoiding. How are you really feeling? Is there something you need that I'm not giving you, and that I'm not giving you as connected as we used to be? And then, be prepared to listen, to really listen, without defensiveness or excuses. Because when you look closer, you might discover truths you didn't want to see. But it's better to face those truths now, while there's still time to mend, than to wait until the distance becomes irreversible. Everything might look fine on the surface. The days might flow smoothly. The conversations might seem pleasant. The laughter might still echo through the rooms. But don't be fooled by the surface. Look closer. Because underneath there might be cracks forming, cracks that, if left unaddressed, can eventually break everything apart. Look closer, not because you want to find fault, but because you care enough to notice what truly needs attention.